Sandro. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another National Week of Financial Education. I thank, first of all, to the Central Bank's Governor, Roberto Campos Neto, for his initial words, but above all, for his continued support to promote financial education in the country, including this as a Washington School of Business, Deputy Governor of the Financial Enterprise Affairs of OECD.
Accepting the invitation. For us, is an honor to have you here with us today. Também, Luiz Gustavo Mansur, chefe do...
Also, Luiz Gustavo Mansur, Chief of the Financial Citizen Production, and Luis Mansur, who is a colleague from Banco Central also, as Governor of Banco Central Bank and Director of Education, Financial Education. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. For many years, NF Week has been consolidated as a relevant event for discussion and fostering financial education, pension education in Brazil. And the theme chosen for this year's week is planning, saving, and savvy use of credit. As the governor mentioned, PLAPOCRE, and financial health. The goal of this choice is to stimulate reflection on the participants on the relevance of each one of these variables for enhancement of their financial health. PAPOCRE and financial health translate various matters that have been worked upon in the Brazilian Forum for Education continuously to build a sustainable financial life and, above all, healthy life on behalf of the Brazilian citizens. With active saving and savvy use of credit, we have better conditions to manage risk and take the opportunities that are presented to us. There's no how to disconnect financial health from all this. Healthy financial life goes far beyond being free of debt or to be able to honor timely your financial commitments. These are relevant, but financial health goes off beyond these issues. Financial health must be understood as seeking for a continuous well-being in financial situation. It must contemplate present issues as well as future ones. It's important to have control over your finances in the day-to-day life, but you should also be able to absorb better financial education and pursue long-term financial goals like retirement, for instance. In this sense, financial education is mentioned in a broader way, also comprehending pension, acquirement of abilities and knowledge to enhance your financial health. This education has the potential to change the behavior of people, making them able to make autonomous and aware choices and achieve their life goals. In my area of performance, financial sector, growing digitalization, simplification, and use of technology brought much commodities and benefits to citizens and institutions, but also made it more complex, above all for the more vulnerable parcels of the populations. In different degrees, the same scenario is applied to insurance and social security. Financial education can help these people to overcome these challenges. In this sense, it's paramount that prioritize efficient public policies, mid and long-term ones. Since the creation of the Forum of Financial Education in 2020, it has been contributing for a new strategy for financial education. This new strategy, to the extent it establishes the advancements since the first public efforts organized to promote financial education in Brazil more than 10 years ago, also points to more things to do. Then we seek for inclusion of the population in financial education and the establishment of partnerships between public institutions and private ones to develop effective actions for education. To guide this effort, Brazilian Forum of Financial Education publicized FIDEF 1 uh, with directives for NF, which are aligned to the definitions coming from the OECD. The enhancement of the level of financial education of citizens is promoted by the members of FDF, its partners, and so many other institutions and people who take financial education to the population. Nobody has the monopoly or market restriction regarding financial education. The more people and organizations engage in this journey, the deeper and more comprehensive will be the benefits for the citizens. In this sense, each one of the 8 members of the forums and their numerous partners work hard to transform these principles in concrete actions for the most various sections of the population and to promote financial education. In August this year, we issued an FBEF action plan that contemplates initiatives, actions, plans, projects, and we have 70 initiatives that are already available to society and other 35 are ongoing. Amongst them, how not quote the financial education projects in the schools promoted by the central bank and the CVM or Previc, the pension fund agency, or Ministry of Economics program of Senacom, the National Treasury program, or the SUSEP award for monographies. These are one of the few examples. I could quote many more and actions undertook by these FBEF members because there are many actions which are a result of effort and engagement of all of us. But it would be naive to think that the FBEF actions would be the only ones able to take financial education to the citizens. I've already said, and I state once again, on the other hand, there's no monopoly or market reserved for financial education. To be well succeeded in this challenge, to promote well-being, financial well-being for the population, we need more engagement and coordinated actions between the public and private sectors, physical persons, academia, educators, everyone who joins us in this effort. The many advancements wouldn't have been possible without the many partners we have been working with along this path. Many of them working with us here in this INF week, in this up to the 14th. It's financial institutions, school associations, companies, citizens that dedicate themselves to take financial education to everyone in their most different, many different forms. Only with participation integrated with society, we would reach the goal to take these teachings to everyone, this challenge which is so huge as the continental dimensions, cultural diversity, and unfortunately inequalities in our country. As Governor Roberto Campos Neto mentioned, only so we will reach the financial education in Brazil. The events will be fundamental to bring awareness to people about the importance of financial well-being, bring awareness to the institutions so they can bring financial education. And although the advancements should be celebrated, we have to keep on with our efforts to implement policies for better financial education. So I'd like to close with 2 final comments. First, thank all the members of FBEF and partners who are being here with us this week, the financial planners, schools, people who will work voluntarily to make this event a success. I thank also the media that with their actions and follow-ups and broadcast of all that's being done for the citizens during these weeks. Without all of you, this week wouldn't be possible. In second place, invite citizens to participate in the activities that will be offered, all for free. Everything was planned carefully and with much care so you find true opportunities to enhance your financial health. I hope you like it and that you take the most advantages of these opportunities. Thank you for your attention and I wish you all a excellent eighth week of financial education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor Mauricio, for your kind words. Now we are going to hand the floor. We're going to start the next session. Thank you very much, Ms. Deputy Governor Mauricio, for your kind words. We're now going to the next round. We're going to have a round table with the participation of foreign members on financial education. Is going to be moderated by Mr. João Evangelista from the Department of Promotion of Financial Citizenship from the Central Bank of Brazil. João, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Sandro. Good morning, everyone who's with us in this opening event of the 8th National Week of Financial Education, an initiative of the Brazilian Forum of Financial Education, FBEF. The NF Week 2021 has as a theme financial planning, saving, active saving, and the savvy use of credit and the relationship of these three elements with financial health. And this is what our roundtable is going to be about. Today we have three amazing guests. Professor Ana Maria Luzardi, who is the founder of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center. She is also the professor of economy from George Washington University, president of the Committee of Research of the Financial Education Network developed by the OECD, and also director of the Italian Committee of Financial Education. We also have with us Florent Messi, who's deputy director of the Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs of the OECD. Florent is also responsible for the financial education project and respect of pension, risk, and insurance, since she's also the chairperson of the International Network on Financial Education, OECD INFI. To round up this table, we have Mr. Luiz Mansur, head of the BCB Department of Financial Citizenship. He's also Brazil's representative in the advisory board of the Financial Network on Financial Education, OECD IF, and also vice president of the Brazilian Forum on Financial Education. We're going to start with Mr. Luiz Mansur for his first remarks. Good morning, Mr. Luiz. Good morning, João. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Well, in fact, it's a great pleasure to be part of this first day of the opening of our eighth week, National Eighth Week of Financial Education. I'd like to greet my colleagues on the table and also thank Ana Maria and Flor Anne for accepting to be with us in this eighth week of financial education. I'm very happy to be able to share with you this table. You are two experts on financial education. I would like to share with you on the importance of financial planning and savvy use of credit on people's financial education. I would like to start by the tripod. The tripod that is PAPOCRE are the basis for financial education for the central bank. All of our initiatives on financial education are based on taking the citizen information on how to organize their finances, planning how to save for the future, the savings account, and how to use credit for their benefit, what we call savvy use of credit. In the last few years, Brazil, millions of people have been included in the financial system, especially through the receiving of the government's emergency uh, aid and digital accounts. But as we say in central bank, financial digital inclusion is only reaches its max when we have financial education to the population. So when we combine these policies, we're able to reach a much higher goal, which is the financial health of our citizen. And this is our main goal, the financial health of our citizen. And it is important that people are able to, it's important that people are able to manage their financial life, as Mr. Mauricio said, so that they can take advantage of consumption and investment that show up along their lives, but at the same token, build a financial resilience so that they can face the hard times. People need certainly to have access to financial education. They need to be included in this market They need financial education to understand the products and financial services that are going to be offered. But most importantly, they need to build financial habits that are healthy. This includes, for example, just for the sake of example, understand the role of credit in their lives. Many times, credit is seen as a villain, but we know that if used correctly, it is, in fact, it can be a great ally if it's applied in a productive fashion in an entrepreneurship, for example, or for the consumption of an asset, or to make a dream come true, or even to help in situations, desperate situations that can happen. But credit needs to be used in a planned fashion and not just to complement your income. So, in order to reach these objectives, we need to work hard and we need to work together. All of the society together, the government, the academia, civil society, and we, as the central bank, believe this also needs to involve the financial system. We believe, we hardly believe, we really believe that the financial system has the responsibility of helping people to reach their financial goals and to face their challenges. And this year, the central bank, through a cooperation technical agreement with the Brazilian Federation of Banks that we call FEBRABAN, we've had many initiatives on financial education that are actually innovative and that have had great social impact that have been developed and made available to the population through this agreement of technical cooperation. One of them, the Brazilian Financial Health Index, has a strong relationship with this panel because it will allow to measure the financial health of the population, their advancements, and it will be able through it to identify improvement points. This index is based on a survey that will be carried out periodically and that serves not only to design public policies that are more adequate, but also for the financial system itself to develop products that better meet the expectations of the population. But it is also important to say that the central bank does not work only after the citizen is included in the financial system. In other words, we do not act only with the adult population that is in the banking system. We believe that the construction of financial health starts from childhood. This is why we've developed also, along the last years, a program called a broad program to bring financial education to the school. We call it Learning Values, and the tripod is the basis for this program. This program is in full expansion. It is the biggest program on financial education that we have had so far in the country. Only so you can have an idea of the numbers, we put more than 10,000 schools in the program out of the 27 states of the country, and we have reached over 660,000 students. To finalize my talk, I would like to say that as soon, this is how we see the financial system of the future. Citizens with their financial abilities developed, very well defined financial dreams that demand from the financial institution products and services that are more and more adequate to their needs. And the sooner we start working on these activities, the better. Thank you very much, João. The floor is back to you. Thank you very much, Luis Mansour. Now let's hand the floor to Florent Messi on her first remarks.
Obrigada, João. I will continue in English for those of you who need the Portuguese translation. First of all, dear Brazilian colleagues, friends, all of you in front of your screen, really congratulations for this 8th National Week on Financial Literacy. I think it is really a great initiative, especially as was explained by your governor, that you are putting together the efforts of all the civil society, the financial institution, and also the central banks and other public institutions. And this is certainly a message at the OECD that we want to reinforce and reinforce again. You know, nothing can happen without coordination. So congratulations on this fantastic collaboration among different players. It is essential. In my quick opening remarks, I thought I would put back financial literacy in the perspective of the COVID, and I can come back on this, on the solutions perhaps, but also in terms of the wider financial landscape. And some of what I will say now very much echoes what Luis just mentioned, so I think it will be a nice complement. I think this crisis really tested like previous crises in the past, the financial resilience, the financial well-being of our citizens. And here, unfortunately, when we look at our last survey, looking at the financial resilience and financial well-being of the population, a survey to which Brazil actually participated, we see that financial resilience is quite low still in the population. If you want just one piece of example, it looks like 40% of the population cannot actually, do not actually have saving that can last for more than 1 month. So typically quite low level. On top of that, we see that also people are worried about their money, and that financial well-being again is relatively low, with again 40% of the population that worry on a constant basis about money. So it is a global picture. If we look at the statistic in Brazil, is relatively similar. What we see importantly is that this financial resilience is actually strongly correlated with financial literacy. And again, we are interested at the OECD to look at the evidence. And when we look at the evidence, we see that still financial literacy is quite low, including on the elements that this week is about. Typically planning, which means, do people have a budget? Do they have planned for the long term? Again, we see that this is an element that is quite often missing in the population. Second, do they are active savers? Quite frankly, around the world, not necessarily, and in Brazil, slightly less. And I like what your governor said about credit. Credit is not the evil in the room. It is actually extremely useful and very important for the society and economy to grow. At the same time, we want to make sure that people are using credit in a savvy way. And here again, we see patterns that are not necessarily there yet. So in a sense, the picture is not as beautiful as we would like to be. And financial literacy is not necessarily playing yet its full role of protecting citizens. And this is why initiatives like that are so important. At the same time, as mentioned by Luis, it is very important to have good financial literacy program, and this is why at the OECD, our latest recommendation on financial literacy is part of the economic recovery package out of COVID. But we also want to underline that financial literacy cannot do it all. Number one is very important to have access to quality products. And this was certainly mentioned by Luis, and I think it is critical. In Brazil, you are doing extraordinary efforts to make sure that people have access to good quality financial product, and this is one. Second, obviously, financial literacy. Third, I want to emphasize the importance of good quality financial consumer protection. And here I have to say, on one side at the OECD last year, we revamped our old framework on financial literacy with this recommendation that also Brazil adopted. But we also are in the process of revamping our overall financial consumer protection framework. And we are revising currently the G20 OECD financial consumer protection principle with this in mind, taking into account digitalization, the learning out of the COVID, and also sustainability issue. So we have this in mind at the OECD, that the combination of this recommendation of financial literacy, and I'll come back on this main guidance containing this recommendation perhaps a bit later, and this framework on financial consumer protection can really support citizens' financial resilience and ultimately financial well-being, because I very much agree that financial well-being is really what we are aiming at. And in order to support those frameworks, we are also developing guidance, especially for policymakers, but also the rest of the society, in order to make sure that financial literacy especially is effective. And I'll end here. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Florent.
Thank you very much, Florent Messi. Now we will hear Professor Ana Maria Luzardi in her initial talk.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I have to say I'm sorry to be only coming via Zoom. I remember many years ago, I actually came to Brazil for the opening of this Financial Education Week. And the first thing I want to say is just how useful this initiative is. In the US, there is this say, it takes a village, which is meant it takes a village to educate a child. But I think we can extend it to it takes a country to educate financially its population. In other words, it really requires the help of everybody. And it's very important to come together, the public sector and the private sector, to to work together toward improving the financial well-being and the financial education of its citizens. So I am very, very much happy to participate to such important events. What this week, or for example, Canada has Financial Literacy Month this month, and Italy had Financial Literacy Month this past October. But these events are incredibly important to increase the awareness, to talk about this topic, and really do a lot of programs around the country so everybody has an access to financial education. And as a researcher, I want to make second a statement which I hope can help, which is financial education works. I know that there have been doubt in the past about the effectiveness of financial education. And I've always been surprised of those statements because in all of my experience, I've actually seen that financial education not only is effective, but changes the life of people. But to put this in a more rigorous way, recently, and together with a big team of researchers, we have done a meta-analysis of financial education in as many as 33 countries. And we have looked at the most rigorous program, the one which are evaluated using randomized control trial. What it means is the most rigorous evaluation. And what we have found is that financial education not only works, but it is also cost effective. And that's important because, of course, we can make financial education work, but we don't have a lot of resources often to do so. So you can consult our website at GFLAC, www.gflac.org, to find that work, which is now forthcoming in a publication. And I think this is just to say that what we are doing, or what week like this can do, is indeed make a dent, make a difference in the life of people. And the third statement is taking financial literacy in the context of a pandemic. What we have learned looking at financial literacy during a crisis is this additional role of financial literacy, which is that we have seen that financial literacy acted like a shield. It protected people a little bit more. In other words, those who have financial literacy are better able to navigate through these difficult times. Just to make an analogy, we always say sailing lessons show all of their worth when you are in a storm. And I think it has been the same for financial literacy. Those who have these basic skills are better able to navigate an economy which is in a crisis. But connected to the topics that we are talking about today, planning, making savvy use of consumption, budgeting, taking care of your finances, a lot of our research here at GFLAC, but in other countries as well, have really shown the connection between financial literacy, financial education, and these good behaviors. So to echo what Florence said, financial literacy and financial education really helps in shaping those behaviors. Clearly, it's not enough. We need good products, we need a good protection, we need a good ecosystem, but certainly financial literacy is part of that ecosystem. And this is why I think I'm so happy to participate today at this event. And I want to also echo the word that your governor said, which is it's strategic to do something like this, because I think it is very important for the well-being of a country. And as we think of the recovery, as we think of getting out of this pandemic, we need to take this crisis as an opportunity, not just to make small steps, but to really jump ahead. I always say the crisis gives us an opportunity to reimagine the future, and we cannot go back to the normal before the pandemic, because that normal was not good enough. we can take the opportunity to really jump forward. And that jumping forward could be indeed, more widespread and stronger financial education program, so everybody has good access to this knowledge, which is so essential today to understand the world around us. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, professora.
Thank you very much, Professor Ana Maria Luzardi. From this moment onwards, to make dialogue easier amongst the panelists, we will lead our table in English. Our guests who want to listen to translation to the Portuguese language, please access the Portuguese channel in YouTube. If you prefer original audio, please select the English channel.
Distinguished guests, Professor Ana Maria Luzardi, Madame Florent Messi, in his introductory remarks, Luis Mansour emphasized the relevance of a trilogy: financial planning, active saving, and the savvy use of credit. You have slightly touched the subject in your introductory remarks as well. And it is something to us really important because this trilogy is present in several financial literacy programs in Brazil for children, youngsters, adults, senior citizens. So, in your view, how important and how useful are financial planning, saving, and the savvy use of credit? And how do public policies around the world address these themes? Who would like to start? Don't be shy.
I can start. I'm sure Anna is not shy either, but since she just talked, perhaps she wants to hold her breath. I think this trilogy is essential, truly, and congratulations for picking the three themes, and also obviously for using those in the programs for young people and for adults. At the OECD, we also consider it a kind of trilogy, looking, at the liability and asset side, so the saving and the credit, and then the planning is really at the center of what financial literacy is. And to give you an example, certainly when we built the PISA financial literacy framework and assessment, the three key pillars were essentially those: planning, having a budget, which we consider as the first step into being financially literate, and then saving a bit in order to improve the resilience, and being able to use credit efficiently, because as we are all saying, credit is essential for a society, an economy, a country to be dynamic. So really essential. And I have to say that countries around the world are actually developing programs around this. But just let me tell you that these three concepts are actually at the core of the OECD core competency on financial literacy for adults, for micro entrepreneurs, for young people. We are currently reviewing the one for adults with the European Commission in order to include more digitalization, more sustainability issues. But these three elements will remain at the very core of those core competencies. Now, if we look at a variety of countries and how they're addressing it, we see that those themes are especially important in the current context, in the context of this crisis, because countries are kind of going back to the essential of financial literacy and how to build financial resilience. And those three concepts are really key. So in terms of planning, we see the emergence of diversity of, app in order to help people making a budget. Large campaign as well are being planned. A lot is happening around building saving, acting saving as having a buffer, but also for the longer term, for pension. And here we see a variety of approaches. Some are using nudges, like in Canada. Some others in Mexico are developing an app to really push saving, especially for pension, which is an issue in Mexico in particular. In New Zealand, we see an approach that is more workplace education with seminar that is extremely promising. I'm finishing up with saying that debt is certainly at the core of all the policymakers' concern currently. So there are a number of campaigns that are emerging in a number of countries. In Hong Kong, I think is the most comprehensive campaign around debt and credit. And again, the message is a positive one, that credit is useful, but you should have a checklist in order to make sure that when you're considering a credit option, it is really the best option for you in terms of what you're aiming at achieving. Is it an investment for the long term, but also in terms of what the credit looks like. And I'll stop here, but there are really a variety of approaches. And what is really key to see is that the delivery channels now are kind of very, very varied. and certainly digitalization with the pandemic is more and more used. But I have to say that it is important to keep in mind that traditional channels also are important, especially to reach vulnerable groups. And I'll hand over to Anna.
Thank you very much, Florent. And I want to echo what Florent just mentioned, which is this trilogy is very important. And I think it's important that we extend our attention to what are the financial decisions that people make. And so that's why, these are very essential decisions. They are, for example, some of the main decisions I cover in my personal finance course. So I teach personal finance at the university. And these are the topics that we certainly cover. And there are a few others, but I think these are very central to, for example, making financial decisions. I also want to mention, since we are speaking, what other countries are doing, that in Italy, at the Financial Education Committee, we thought it was very important to give guidelines of what do we mean with financial education. What are the topics that should be covered when we talk about financial education? And many people, for example, say we want to do financial education, but when we went and saw what is that they are doing, often was only concentrated on one topic. And so we designed these guidelines, following very much the guidelines of the OECD, and had, for example, the list of topics that people, for example, should be covering in the classroom. If you are teaching financial education to students, what are you teaching? And also financial education for adults. And these three topics are very central in the list of topics that we have mentioned in this guideline, which are available on our website. And I have to say, I also hope that this trilogy is incorporated in the policies. So, for example, if I look at what often policymakers have done, I think there has been a lot of attention to long-term savings. So, for example, we have tax incentive to push people to save for retirement. But we have very little in terms of short-term savings. What we have found, and this has been an experience during the pandemic, that maybe people had saving in their own retirement account, which unfortunately often are not accessible, but they didn't have a buffer or they don't have liquid asset to meet a shock. And so, we need to think more holistically about personal finances. At the same time, for example, we have looked at a lot at the asset side of the balance sheet, but not look at debt and debt management, which is, of course, so important. We need to also consider, the borrowing. And in fact, certainly in the US, where young people, if they go to college, they start their economic life in debt. They are carrying student loan, from this very young age. Debt and debt management is incredibly important. And this is also often, and the reason why I think it is considered a villain, it is because this is where we see often the problems of people. This is where, if you make a mistake, the consequences happen very quickly and can be quite dramatic. Let's actually consider the financial crisis, and let's consider all of the people, for example, who engages in loan and mortgages that they did not or could not afford given the economic conditions. So I think, the lesson of these two crises is that we need to look holistically at the balance sheet of families. Certainly debt and debt management is important, and so are other decisions, saving for the long term, but also for the short term, and certainly planning. And, there as well, I don't think we have paid enough attention to this. So I'm very glad to hear, in a sense, this trilogy, and hopefully there will be, a more holistic approach to, promoting financial education and financial well-being.
Well, thank you very much, Hannah and Florent. Mansour, we know you play the role of a practitioner as the head of the BCB's Department for Financial Citizenship Promotion, but you also have an academic background with a graduate degree in public policy from the University of Michigan. So, based on your experience, how do you believe that the financial well-being of an adult could somehow result from educational public policies, including financial education in school?
Well, João, you know, at first glance, your question seems a straightforward question, but when looking at it more carefully, it touches on three important aspects of an adult's financial life. The role of financial education, timing, since you mentioned financial education in school, and the role of government in providing financial education, because you mentioned the role of public policies in promoting financial education. So let me see if I can also break my answer in these three aspects, okay? So first, financial education is a very important tool for increasing financial literacy and capability. I'm very glad to hear Ana Maria's comments that, I mean, despite this debate or controversy about the importance of the effectiveness of financial education, that, I mean, from her long experience with financial education, that, I mean, financial education really works, is effective, and that her global center ran a study that, in fact, showed that financial education works, is effective, and it's cost effective as well. That was very comforting hearing for her. So our financial well-being is said to be closely related to the way we manage our day-to-day finances, to our capacity to absorb financial shocks. We feeling comfortable and on track to meet our financial goals, and also having the financial freedom to make the choices that would allow us to enjoy life. So, I mean, it's easy to conclude that adults are more likely to experience good financial well-being if they acquire knowledge, if they acquire financial skills and behaviors that will help them to take informed and conscious financial decisions. So that was the first one, responding to the role of financial education and to the importance of financial education in adults' financial life. But secondly, it's regarding timing. I mean, it's important to emphasize that financial education is beneficial at any moment in life, regardless of our financial or economic situation. I mean, you don't need to be in a moment of financial crisis to look for help or to change. You can start building your financial capability in stable times, and this is most likely the best way. So on the other side, however, never is too late to start off, right? So you can look for help, you can look for behavior change, and financially re-educate yourself in times of crisis as well. Financial planning, saving actively, and using credit consciously and wisely can start at any time. And of course, talking about timing, the sooner, the earlier in life this knowledge and capabilities are acquired and developed, the better prepared the individual will be to face his or financial adult life. And I mean, talking about sooner and earlier, there is no better place to start this process than in schools. We know that kids are little sponges that absorb everything surrounding them, so the school environment is certainly a good place to start this process very early. So we believe that financial education programs implemented in schools are a strong and effective ally in developing early and long-lasting financial capabilities in adults. And it's also known to us that financial education in school benefits not only the student, but also his family, his communities, benefits the teacher, the school principal. It's a win-win situation with positive collateral effects, positive externalities beyond the children. That's what we believe at the central bank. That's why we have implemented our financial education program for schools, Aprender Valor, that I just mentioned in my introductory remarks. But now finally, come to the last aspect of your question. I believe that the government has a very important role when it comes to financial education and public policies. It seems to me, and this is a part where I certainly would like to hear from Florian and from Ana Maria, it seems to me that the main role of government lies on promoting and inducing large-scale financial education initiatives. And I think Brazil has two good examples of that. So one happened in 2018 when the government implemented changes in our common core curriculum for schools. And he gave as a directive that financial education should be taught in schools, not as a standalone subject, but that financial education should be taught integrated, embedded into other subjects such as Portuguese, math, and human sciences. So after that, policy, there was a large movement from the private sector and from government, from other levels of government, to launch initiatives to help schools and teachers in addressing this national directive. And the second one is our program Aprender Valor that I just mentioned, that is intended exactly to help schools and professors to implement this common core curriculum directive. So we provide free, ready-to-use class plans for Portuguese, math, and human science with financial education embedded in these class plans. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have already over 10,000 schools, over 600,000 students enrolled in this program. So I believe that those numbers give an example of the importance of public policies in providing, as I stated, as providing and fostering financial education in large scale in our country. That's it. Thanks.
Well, thanks a lot, Luis. You just mentioned Aprender Valor, which is Banco Central's program that was designed to transform the relationship that Brazilian children have with their money. It seems relevant to me to stress that the program seeks to encourage students to develop their financial skills so that they can establish a conscious, responsible, and autonomous relationship with the financial resources from early childhood and consequently enjoy financial well-being throughout their lives. But Luis, you just mentioned that you would like to hear Ana Maria's and Florent's opinion on the role of governments. So please, let's hear them. Ana, please.
So thank you very much. I wanted to tell you that, for example, one of the reasons that we launched Financial Education Month in Italy, which is done by this Financial Education Committee, which has been created by the government, is because I came to Brazil many years ago, and I remember that I think it was the head of CVM, Leonardo Pereira, telling me that when Financial Education Month started, it quickly developed. That in a year there were just a few initiatives in main cities, but the year later there were initiatives all over the countries, and so that it's really something that can expand very, very much. And so one of my first recommendations to people who are listening to us is to have this Financial Education Week or Financial Education Month all over the countries. And I think policymaker would do a great job in establishing such initiative because it really has an important role. And we are also very much looking to implement what Brazil has done, which is have financial education in school. As the OECD is telling us via this visionary project, which is PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA measures the skills that young people need to participate to society. And since 2012, financial literacy has been added to that list of topics. And I cannot agree more that, today, you not only need to be able to read and write, but you also need to be able to make good financial decisions. You need to be able to have that basic financial literacy to understand the world around you. And to policymakers, I wanted to say, not only people can make better financial decisions for themselves, but also for society. We have seen that, when people make mistakes, taxpayers often are asked to pay for those. And also that, and we have seen in several studies that people understand, if they are financially literate, understand reforms better. So, you're also, as policymaker, better able to implement some of the reforms that perhaps are needed as the economy is changing so fast. So, I really hope that many policymakers can take the suggestions and the initiative of Brazil of making financial literacy mandatory in school. It can be done. And I think, like having it across the curriculum is another important way to do this. I have two quick recommendations as well. It's critically important that we educate the young, and that education also goes to the family. But when we look at the adults, I think another important place is the workplace. And so I think financial education in the workplace can be very important. One could argue, why should an employer, do financial education? Well, it turns out that, if people have economic worries, they spend also potentially time at work dealing with those worries, or they might be less productive. So, the workplace, I think, is another important place where to do financial education. And last, if you look at the statistics about financial literacy, and I'm really talking around the world, so this is not just an effect, for example, in Italy, Brazil, but it is common around the world, and it has made much more dramatic during the pandemic. One group that we see is vulnerable when it comes to financial literacy is women. And women is not a small group of the population, it's half of the population. But studies over studies tells us that there is a gender gap, so women know less, and women have been hit very strongly by the pandemic. So I think, as we think of rebuilding from this crisis, try to put more attention and more policy and investing in this more vulnerable group, I think is the way to have a strong, resilient and inclusive recovery. So do invest on women.
Well, thank you, Anna. Before we head on to Florent, I'd just like to make a clarification. Financial education is mandatory in schools in Brazil in a cross-curricular fashion. And this has been the result of a law from the Ministry of Education that has imposed it not as a standalone subject, but in a cross-curricular fashion. Thank you. Florent, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joao. And I think I would just only reinforce what has been said. So clearly at the OECD, we do believe that policymakers really have a critical role to play in pushing the financial literacy agenda for macro reasons, typically because we know that financial literacy can promote the financial well-being of citizens, and for macro reasons, as mentioned by Anna, because we know that market that can be more competitive, more transparent, more efficient, and that ultimately consumers can understand better the products they are buying. So, a positive spillover effect for the government, for taxpayer, but also for financial institutions. So it's a kind of win-win situation here. So it is in the interest of policymakers really to have a look at financial literacy. And then the question we are asking ourselves at the OECD is how? And I fully agree with Ada Maria, it is working. It is working under certain conditions, circumstances. And this is where the government have a key role to play. At the OECD, what we are promoting, and this is actually one key part of the recommendation on financial literacy that Brazil has adhered to, is the development of a national strategy for financial literacy. Clearly, what it means is financial literacy is taken seriously at the national level, that there is a framework whereby different public institutions, the private sector, the civil society is cooperating together in order to address this national agenda. And this starts with an understanding of what are the needs of the population very, very clearly, and then comes to how to implement it. And here, I have to say that the government has a leading role to play in developing this national strategy for financial literacy, which Brazil has done, as was kind of leading a country in developing a first national strategy for financial education a while back. And I understand that it's been revised recently, so congrats also for that. But also not only in developing this national strategy, which is a kind of framework on what financial literacy is about and how to go about it, but also in pushing the implementation. And clearly one of the sectors where governments have a key role to play is schools. And here I'm fully aligned with Luis and Anna on this. It is critical that financial literacy is happening as early as possible. We know that teaching an adult is very difficult because we have little time to do that, because we're not here to learn, we are here to act. When people are young, it's more easy to actually develop new habits, and actually they are also great spreader, I would say, of good habits among their family. So really critical to start early and at school. Why? And we are often asked about, whether this is a skill that can be actually gained within the family. Certainly it can, and we see the influence of parents on children. But at the same time, we know that financial literacy is correlated to the socioeconomic background of students. So in a sense, if we don't have it in school, we have the risk of perpetuating inequalities. So very important to start in school. And again, I think the initiative of putting it as a cross-curricular is the more operational one, because quite often it's difficult to add an additional topic. And in addition to that, we've seen through the PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment that Anna Maria kindly mentioned, we've seen that in some cases, it's actually more impactful if you integrate it into other existing subjects, because it makes it more practical. And this is what we want to see. We are not teaching these new skills for the beauty of it, but really in order for young people to be able to use them in their current life, because I remind you that actually students and kids have access to financial products earlier on, thanks to their phone or actually through internet. So it's important that they already have the skills when they're young, and it's especially important that they have the skills when they're about to make an adult decision. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you for your comments, Florent. And this approach that we have decided to follow in Brazil, we see that it is followed by other countries in the world as well. In the other end of the world, for example, Australia is using an approach very similar to ours. Well, Florent, you are the chairperson of the International Network on Financial Education. Brazil, represented by the BCB and the CVM, has been in the network since its foundation, and more recently, in October last year, Brazil as a nation, although not yet an OECD country, signed the OECD Legal Instrument 0461, entitled OECD Recommendation of the Council on Financial Literacy. Could you tell us briefly what this document is about and why it is such an important source of reference for us and for the whole world?
Thank you, Joao. And yes, it looks very legalistic, but it is indeed a kind of foundation for financial literacy globally. And again, my comments to the Brazilian government to have adhered to it. So what this document is a kind of summary of all the recommendations that the OECD has produced internally. So we had 5, and also all the G20 principle and guidance that we have produced over the last 20 years. So it's kind of a sum. It's not that big, but we try to summarize all that into 3 key directions that we believe are critically important. And I have to say, before I get into these 3 directions, that Brazil, represented by Bank Central and CVM, has been very active also in the development of this recommendation and this legal instrument. So it's not only a produce of the OECD, it's actually the produce of the International Network of Financial Education, which is representing 130 countries. And again, Brazil is one of its leaders. Luis is actually present in the advisory board of the INFE. So these 3 directions, without no further ado. The first one is the development of a national strategy for financial education, which I already mentioned. But there we also go into the detail of what a national strategy means. I briefly mentioned it before, so I won't repeat it. But we also look at key target audience. And here, typically, we look at young people and mention the fact that financial literacy starts early. We look at women, which I completely agree with Anna, really deserve to be focused on. It's more than half of the global population, and still we see vulnerabilities here. We also look at micro and small entrepreneurs, which are key and essential part of the economy, of the activity of a country, but also at senior and other vulnerable groups. So we are also focusing on some target audience. But the second pillar, we are looking at the challenges in the various areas of the financial sector. And here we are kind of trying to answer to the question you're raising with focusing on saving credit, but we are also looking at other areas like insurance, which has been also a focus during this crisis, with saving for retirement as well as other areas. And the last part, the third part of this document, is really looking at the tricky and challenging part of delivering and making sure that it works. Because I can confirm that it works, but there are certain elements that needs to be in place in order for financial literacy to truly have an impact on financial literacy. And here, this part of the document is looking at the various ways through which we know that we can reach out effectively to people and impart them with the financial skills that they will need in order to improve their financial well-being.
Right, and Flohan, it's interesting to note that the FIBEFI has issued 2 communiques. Deputy Governor Mauricio mentioned that, a couple of communiques establishing guidelines and an action plan for the implementation of Brazil's renewed national strategy on financial education. Both communiques refer to the OECD recommendations on financial literacy. Not a coincidence. It's an extremely important source of reference for the FBEF. Professor Ana Maria Lusardi, you are the founder and the academic director of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, the GFLEC, launched in 2011 at the George Washington University School of Business, where you are a professor of economics and accountancy. Dealing with data, it's your daily life. You just mentioned statistics. I believe that you dream about it and you wake up thinking of it. Would you tell us how, in what way, objective data can be relevant to financial literacy and financial inclusion policies?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, you are right. We are celebrating our decennial this year. So we are in the middle of these celebrations. And so it really takes kind of 10 years, to see the result of that work. And GFLEC, I founded GFLEC because we wanted a lot of the programs and also the policy to be based on data and to based on research. And we believe because resources are limited and we need to be able to allocate them efficiently. And so this is, in a sense, why GFLEC was born and why it also had this name. We are global and we are looking at the data around the world, and on that we have benefited a lot from the data collected by the OECD, who has provided this important piece of information to, I think, guide the policies of many countries. And what we did, we have also elaborated that data. So, for example, we have worked on the PISA data, the Program for International Student Assessment, but also for the data for the adults. So it's a very critical role, and I think that data can provide a lot of information so that we can be better in doing policy and programs. And I also want to mention one initiative we have done recently. In fact, it started 5 years ago. We have designed what we have called the Personal Finance Index. So we have collected data, coming back to the trilogy, on the topics that people need to know in order to make financial decisions. And rather than 3, we have identified 8 because we had the luxury this time to design a very comprehensive personal finance index. So these 8 topics span from consuming and planning and debt, but also ensuring go-to sources of information, managing risk. And so we have, as many as 8 topics, and we have collected data each year in January of each year. And the benefit of collecting data over time is you can see the evolution, first of all. You can study more the population. And each year we have oversampled a group, for example, a vulnerable group, to be more careful and to focus more on some of the groups. Since this data collection started in the US, we started with the Hispanic population, which is a very important and growing group in the US, but we have studied the millennials, we have studied African Americans, we have studied women, and we have studied the young. So, you know, in the different generations as well. So in a sense, we are really trying to focus on these important groups. And when you collect data over time, you are looking for or hoping for some big event to happen. So you can look at data before and after. And I have to say, we didn't have to wait for a long time for some big event to happen. So we have data, for example, before and after the pandemic, and we can relate and study how the pandemic has affected the personal finance knowledge of individuals. So, and you know, we have learned a lot by doing that, and all of the programs that we have designed at GFLAG, that's another things we do, design financial education program, have been very much guided by the data collection. So the data allows us, I think, to be more precise, to understand, you know, who are the groups, for example, we should focus on, and also, you know, it allows us to be more effective. And I think an important piece also the data would be to do evaluations. You know, everyone always asks, but which program works? What is more effective? You know, now we have some information about this, but I think we need more data as well, and more evaluations, so we can tell people around the world what works and how other programs can be implemented as well in other countries.
All right. Thank you so much, Anna, and congratulations on your decennial and on the beautiful work you have been doing along this decade. As you spoke, I saw Luis Mansour, and I saw that his eyes were shining. Luis, I'm sure that you have something to say about this collection of index and the creation of an index in Brazil, right? You got something to say about that?
Yes, certainly, João. Well, I mean, the question you are asking me is, I mean, very related to the previous question that you made to Ana Maria, I mean, about the importance of data for public policymakers, right? My answer will certainly touch on a lot of aspects already mentioned by Anna. But I would like to start off by saying that public policy needs to rely on two key components: data for designing the public policy, and impact evaluation to evaluate effectiveness and refine policy. I mean, we need to check if the policies we designed are really being effective, and if not, we need to redesign them and rethink them. And so I think those are two key components: data for designing and impact evaluation for reassessing the effectiveness of the policy. So in Brazil, there was a gap in terms of reliable tools and data to evaluate our citizens' financial life from this perspective of financial education and financial health. So the construction of this index was indeed an answer to filling this gap. In terms of inputs, the index uses regular field surveys and also individual cash questionnaires that are offered online in the Federation's website, at FEBRABAN's website. The index is very flexible. It measures financial health on individual and on an aggregated basis. Therefore, we can have data for an individual, for a city, a region, and of course, we have data on a national level. This data will be certainly very useful for individuals who will be able to identify strengths and weaknesses in their financial life. They will be able to compare index scores with the national average, with family members, with colleagues. They can work to increase strengths and overcome weaknesses. And I mean, with their regular interactions with the index tool, our people will be able to follow their progress through time and through different moments in their lives. So, but this data will be very precious, not only for citizens, for individuals, but for all stakeholders involved with promoting financial education and financial health: policymakers, academics, companies, and the financial system itself. With this information, we can pursue better public policies, we can foster civil society engagement, and develop financial products that meet our population needs. And for the central bank, for us, I mean, this information is certainly very valuable as a regulator. It can be used to guide financial institutions on their relationship with clients, and in due course, of course, the central bank can use this information to formulate or refine bank regulation. I would like to bring some illustrative data from this index. We interviewed 5,200 people to make this the first round of the index. So in terms of data, we have that around 60% of people interviewed reported that expenses and financial commitments are stressful in their lives. So here comes an emotional, psychological component of financial health. About 70% have equal or greater expenses than their income. Only 34% feel capable of recognizing a good financial investment. 62% believe the way that they are handling their finances is an obstacle for enjoying life. So, okay, but when we look at the overall index on a scale from 0 to 100, the national index is 57, which is not bad news. It's a balanced financial life, but with very limited space for failure. So at the end, it's not bad news, but I mean, certainly we still have a lot of work to do ahead of us. That's the beauty of the index, right? We can measure and we can, gauge how we will approach financial education problems in our country.
Well, thank you very much, Luis. And my dear friends, I'm sure that our audience and I could stay the whole day here learning from the three of you. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. It's been almost 1 hour since we started our panel. And I unfortunately must ask you to deliver your final messages. Florhan, could we start with you, please? And thank you very much for being with us here today.
Absolutely, Joao, and I have to say it's been a pleasure. I thought as a concluding word, I would just remind ourselves, and I think it's been beautifully said by many of you, that financial literacy is essential, but it's essential in order to promote financial well-being or financial health, as you call it in Brazil. And what do we mean by that? We simply mean that with better financial literacy, people have more choices in their current and future life. They have more choices for themselves, for their family, for their children, and perhaps for future generation. So it's really a message of hope that it is a policy agenda that is critical and at the core of a society that is looking, towards the future. And this is where I want to say, and by the way, it is also kind of matching the OECD motto, which is better policies for better life. And I think financial literacy is one of the most beautiful, nicer examples that we can find. Thank you. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Florhan. And Ana Maria Lusardi, you had the Financial Education Committee in Italy in charge of designing a national strategy for financial literacy. And last month, October, in Italy, you held its Financial Literacy Month. So I'd like you to tell us briefly how did it go and what did you learn from it, including possible suggestions for Brazil? And then please go on with your concluding words.
Thank you very much. As I've mentioned, we took inspiration from Financial Education Week in Brazil, and the expectation of what was said actually turned out to be true. So this was our 4th edition. The committee started working in 2017, in the fall of 2017. So we had our 4th Financial Education Month, and it was a big success. Over time, Financial Education Month had expanded exponentially. So this year we had more than 700 events. And when we look at the number, there will probably be, close to 1,000 or so on. And everybody participated. So as I said, it did take a village. It took the whole country to participate to this event. And we were absolutely delighted to do so and to see the success. One of the things that, or maybe a couple of things that we have learned is that, there is no small place or no small idea. So, there was a little town in this region in Italy of Abruzzo where there was this initiative of this school to have the children be the teacher. And so the children were invited by the mayor to do financial education for the population of that little town. And eventually the children also started growing a vegetable garden so that they could understand, how prices work, how you create income, and so they sold the vegetables in the market. And this year they bought the garden, taking a loan from a local bank. So this was a very little initiative, and we were so intrigued that we went each year to visit the little town and to meet the children. And even the Financial Times wrote about it. Just to say, there is no small initiative when you look at financial education. And this year as well, even foreign institutions have participated to Financial Education Month in Italy. And what we have done, we have taken the initiative which are scalable, and we have listed them on our portal, which is called Quello che conta, which means what matters or what counts, which is a little bit of a plain word. This is the portal of financial education of the committee. And so we have a section which is called the Laboratory of Ideas. And we have posted there all of the initiatives that were done that others can replicate. And in addition to this one in the schools, I want to mention the one done in the mayor office or in the municipality, because Italy is composed of a lot of small places, and we think that doing things locally, doing initiative locally, can be very important. So we have gone to initiatives which are a little bit a festival of financial education, where people meet in the square and we discuss these topics. And so, we want to take all of these ideas and make them available so that people can replicate them, in other countries, in other places in Italy as well. And I want to end with the motto of our month and what we have said, in particularly at the end of the month, is that Financial Education Month lasts all year long. So it's just, a month to celebrate, but, we want basically, initiative to start, but to continue, of course, all year long. So this has been our motto, and I wanted to say it in Italian, which is il mese dell'educazione finanziaria dura tutto l'anno. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Luis Mansur, your final words, please.
First of all, I'd like to thank again Anna and Florian for taking time to share their knowledge with us. I'm very sure our audience has learned a lot from it. I certainly learned a lot and enjoyed a lot. I would like to conclude by asking those who are watching us on YouTube to participate and invite family and friends to also participate in our National Week of Financial Education. A lot of people take their time to exercise, to work out, looking for more energy, for greater physical health, right? So why shouldn't we also take time to develop our financial knowledge and skills to improve our financial health, right? So pick an activity from the list in our website. Come and join us in this Financial Education Week. You will feel better. Your physical health will also benefit from it. We guarantee it. And the central bank guarantees it. So come and join us. Go for it. Join us at this Financial Education Week. It was great talking to all of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Luis. Well, once again, I would like to thank our three very special guests for sharing with us your expertise and the most precious good that you have, which is your time. Thank you very much, Luis Mansur, Florian Messi, and Ana Maria Lusardi. Thank you all for participating in the opening event of Brazil's 8th Annual Week for Financial Education. And Sandro, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, você, João.
Thank you very much, you, João, and all of our guests. It's a pleasure to have you here presenting your strategies for credit planning. The interpretation apologizes, but the audio is breaking. The interpretation apologizes, but it's not possible to interpret. He said, for further information, visit our website www.bcb.gov.br so you can learn more about this week. I wish everybody a wonderful day.